Now recording is on. Very good evening, friends. Today is the first session on insolvency and bankruptcy code. Even before having an overview, let us have a look at the syllabus which is available on the website of ibbi.gov.in. If you are new to the subject, you can log in to the website of ibbi.gov.in and have a look at the syllabus given under the head Limited Insolvency Examination under the broad head examination. There is a little bit of change in the syllabus if you have studied the subject prior to December 2020. So up to 31st December, the syllabus was old and now it is new syllabus. Code is now of 10 marks and regulations, rules and regulations are of 15 marks. So 25 marks are assigned to the code and regulations. Then Companies Act LLP and Partnership Act 4 marks. Various allied laws 11 marks. Finance and accounts 5. General awareness 5 marks. Case laws 10 marks. And then there are case studies. Case studies almost cover 50 marks. 20 plus 40 marks. 40 case laws plus case studies, so 50 marks. So case studies are given prominence in the subject and we have accordingly developed various case studies, some of which are already available on my website, carkgupta.com. We have got our Facebook page also. So I'll share the link of that page as well. Mera Facebook page ka link share kar dena, chat box mein. So it will be now shared in the chat box. And we have got our YouTube channel also, which is not that famous till now. We have just started that YouTube channel. So we'll be uploading all the presentations there as well. Our motto is not at all commercial. It is just to guide the members in passing the examination. And whatever proceeds we are receiving for this course shall be donated towards construction of Shri Ram Temple at Ayodhya. Now, let us start the session. So this is a presentation on insolvency and bankruptcy code, section-wise coverage. My mobile number and my email ID is available. My website address is also available. And on my website, there are various presentations. And the video lectures, which we started sometime in May 2020. So it has been almost more than 9 months now that we have been doing this various presentations on IBC and evaluation as well. And almost all these presentations, they are available on my Facebook page and YouTube channel also. Some of them have been uploaded on YouTube channel as well. Regarding contents of this PPT, there are 5 parts in IBC. Each part has got chapters and then there are various sections. Definitions are there in part 1 also. Part 1 definitions, they apply to the whole of the code. And then there are part-wise definitions as well, which apply to that particular part. Like part 2 relates to CIRP. So those definitions are applicable for that part only. But the definitions which are given in part 1, they apply to the whole of the code. The whole code is divided into 5 parts and 255 sections. Part 5, it is miscellaneous and it contains sections 224 to 255. And besides that, there are 12 schedules. Earlier there were 11 schedules, now there are 12 schedules. Let us have a brief introduction about the subject. As we all know, even prior to this promulgation of IBC, various statutes were available, like SICA was there, Sikh Industrial Companies Act, in which companies were referred to BIFR, Board of Industrial and Financial Reconstruction. Then there were Presidency Insolvency Act, Provincial Insolvency Act, RDB Act was there, SURFACE Act was there. So mechanism was there even prior to this insolvency and bankruptcy code. But the government thought that the existing framework for insolvency and bankruptcy resolution is inadequate ineffective and it resulted in undue delays. And it provided the opportunity to the defaulter as well to delay the process, which is not there in this IBC. IBC is a time-bound process, as we all know. So there have been various committees and commissions which recommended consolidation of insolvency and insolvency and bankruptcy laws, which were scattered over the various acts. In November 2015, BLRC, Bankruptcy Law Reforms Committee, it recommended the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, and it was introduced in the Parliament in December 2015. Basic objective of the code, which is a complete code in itself. It covers the act, it covers rules and regulations, it covers bylaws, it contains forms, procedures, everything. It is a self-contained code. So objective of the code is to consolidate and amend the laws relating to Insolvency Acts of 1909 and 1920, Presidency Insolvency Act and Provincial Insolvency Act. And besides that, it amends the various existing laws. So wherever provisions related to insolvency and bankruptcy are there, so they are consolidated at one place. This code, Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, it aims at promoting investments as well as resolution of insolvency of corporate persons, firms, and individuals. So almost everyone is covered in a time-bound manner. So time is of the essence under this code. It provides for designating the NCLT and DRT as the adjudicating authorities. So there is the concept of adjudicating authorities. For corporate persons, the adjudicating authorities NCLT and the appellate authorities NCLT. And for individuals and partnership firms, the adjudicating authorities DRT and the appellate authorities DRAT. One of the unique features of the code is that it separates the commercial aspects of insolvency and bankruptcy proceedings from judicial aspects. This Bankruptcy Law Reforms Committee, it was of the view that there are two aspects of the insolvency and bankruptcy proceedings. One is the commercial aspect, which should be best left to the wisdom of the stakeholders. And then there are judicial aspects, which can be adjudged by the adjudicating authorities. So it provides for a separation of these two features. It also provides for establishment of the insolvency professional agencies and information utilities. Information utilities, we will see later that they are a repository of financial information. And insolvency professional agencies, they are akin to our institute. Suppose we are a chartered accountant, then we are an insolvency professional, and the person who's the agency which is regulating us, that is IIIP ICAI or IIIP ICSI or IIIP ICMAI, that is the insolvency professional agency which is regulating our conduct, like ICAI is regulating our conduct as a professional. And the regulator in this case is IBBI, Insolvency and Bankruptcy Board of India. So wherever the reference to board is there, board here refers to IBBI. Like in income tax, wherever board is referred to, it means CBDT. So here board means the IBBI. Before embarking upon the journey of IBC, let us see the statement of objects and reasons. Till date, there was no single law in India that dealt with insolvency and bankruptcy. Provisions relating to insolvency and bankruptcy for companies, they were found in Sikh Industrial Companies Act, SICA, RDB, SURFACE, and the Companies Act. These statutes, they provide for creation of multiple fora, such as Board for Industrial and Finance Reconstruction, BIFR, then DRTs were there, NCLTs were there, and their respective appellate tribunals. Liquidation of companies, that was hitherto being handled by high courts. And individual bankruptcy and insolvency, that was being dealt with under the Presidency Towns Insolvency Act 1909 in respect of the main towns of Bombay, Calcutta, Madras, etc., and the Provincial Insolvency Act 1920, which are related to which were catering to the other provinces other than these mega towns, and was dealt with by the courts. The existing framework for insolvency and bankruptcy, it was considered inadequate, ineffective, and it was felt that it is resulting in undue delays in resolution. Therefore, this proposed legislation of IBC was there. So this is the statement of objects and reasons which was given. The objective of Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code is to consolidate and amend the laws relating to reorganization, and insolvency resolution of corporate persons, partnership firms, and individuals in a time-bound manner. So, first are the persons who are covered. So, companies are covered, firms are covered, individuals are covered. Another important feature is time-bound manner. So, it aims at dealing with reorganization and insolvency resolution in a time-bound manner for maximization of value of assets of such persons. So another feature is maximization of value of assets. So it is not a recovery mechanism, it is a resolution mechanism and balance the interests of all the stakeholders. So it tries to strike a balance between the interest of all the stakeholders, including alteration in the priority of payment of government dues. Like if you've seen the Income Tax Act and other act, in all those acts, government dues were at a higher pedestal. Government dues were given preference, but here in IBC, government dues are at a lower pedestal. They are not given that much importance. And to establish an Insolvency and Bankruptcy Board of India, IBBI, and matters connected therewith or incidental thereto. So this was the objective. An effective legal framework for timely resolution of insolvency and bankruptcy would support development of credit markets, because whenever there is a economic stress in any company or firm or individual, then the credit is squeezed. So this would develop credit markets and it will encourage entrepreneurship. If some company or individual or partnership firm is having financial stress, then if that financial stress is resolved, then it will encourage entrepreneurship. Another entrepreneur could take over. It would also improve ease of doing business and facilitate more investments, leading to higher economic growth and development. So this was the basic objective. Now, let us see this Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. It has 5 parts, 5 and 23 chapters, 12 schedules are there, 255 sections are there. It got the President's assent on 28th May and the effective date was 1st of December 2016, but various provisions were notified on different dates. Part 1 is preliminary, as I said. Part 1 is, it contains sections 1 to 3. Part 2, it deals with insolvency resolution and liquidation for corporate persons. And then there are various chapters in this which relate with the CIRP, liquidation, fast track, voluntary liquidation, adjudicating authority, offenses and penalties. This is an overview. Part 3, it deals with insolvency and bankruptcy process for individuals and partnership firms. Part 4, it deals with regulation of insolvency professionals and agencies and information utilities. So these were notified on different dates. So different dates also I have given in the presentation itself. Part 5, it is miscellaneous, covering section 224 to 255. And as I said, there are 12 schedules. So these are the 12, this is the 12th schedule, which covers the amendments to various acts. Before we embark upon the journey of IBC, let us see something about Bankruptcy Law Reforms Committee, BLRC 2015. So it was in the budget speech in 2014-15 that the then Finance Minister, Shri Arun Jaitley ji, he stated that the entrepreneur-friendly legal bankruptcy framework will be created for small and medium enterprises to enable them to exit business easily. Because it was the entry to a business is easy, but the exit route is not that easy. If you want to wind up a company, then the process was cumbersome earlier. So this was the need of the hour, as the entrepreneurs found that they were stuck with the business organization years after that business has failed. Suppose there is a government also recognizes that if you start a business, it may be either successful or it may result in a failure. So if the business meets with a failure, then there should be an easy exit route. There should be an entrepreneur-friendly legal bankruptcy framework. It was felt that the entrepreneurs, they were stuck with the business organization years after that business has failed, making them face the error of labor unions and government authorities. So starting was easy, but exit was not that easy. So the process of exit was too complex and tardy. To bring back the confidence of the entrepreneur, it was essential that the bankruptcy framework be reviewed and reformed. So for this, Vishwanathan Committee was set up. In the backdrop of the statement by the then Finance Minister, BLRC was formed under the chairmanship of Shri T.K. Vishwanathan. It was set up in August 2014, hereinafter referred to as Vishwanathan Committee. So Vishwanathan Committee submitted its report in November 2015 in 2 volumes. Volume 1, it was text of findings and recommendations, and Volume 2 was the draft IBC. Almost all the recommendations of BLRC were adopted. So recognizing that there are multiple contradictory elements in the legal arrangements, the committee took up the task of drafting a single unified framework which deals with bankruptcy and insolvency by persons other than financial firms. So financial service providers, they were initially kept outside the purview of this committee. Vishwanathan Committee was a firm belief that financial creditors alone can provide the best answer in resolving insolvencies, being a business decision. So the stress was on the giving powers to financial creditors. As we will see later, our IBC, it is based on UK law. There is difference between UK and US law. In US, what happens is that if there is a failure, the existing promoters, they are not given a goodbye. They still continue to hold the position of promoters. But in UK law, if there is a failure of business enterprise, then the promoters have to give way to the financial creditors. So creditors come into their position. So this is something similar to this IBC. The committee also observed that the failure of some business plans is integral, because whenever we will start a business, it may be either a successful venture or a failure. So the government also recognizes, or the committee also recognized, that the failure of some of the business plans is integral to the process of the market economy. When business failure takes place, the best outcome for society is to have a rapid renegotiation between the financiers to finance the going concern using a new arrangement of liabilities and with a new management team. If this cannot be done, the best outcome for society is rapid liquidation. So first of all, try to resolve the economic conflict. If that is not possible, then go for rapid liquidation. So whatever is to be done should be done rapidly. When such arrangements can be put into place, the market process of creative destruction will work smoothly with greater competitive vigor and greater competition. So this was the recommendations of the Vishwanathan Committee. 2-step process: insolvency resolution and then liquidation. First of all, before initiating liquidation process, all possibilities of resolution should be exhausted. So first of all, there should be an attempt to resolve the economic conflict, and if that resolution is not possible, then liquidation. Noticing that the existing process of rescuing the companies is susceptible to manipulation, as it allows the debtor promoter to seek endless extensions. Like in Sika, if one company went into Sika, then without referring to BIFR, no action could be taken against that company. The committee sought to restrict the resolution period to 180 days with a maximum of 90 days extension. Now it is 330 days in all, including litigation process, as it felt that the seriousness will come into decision making if the time is shortened. So it stressed upon a time-bound resolution, 180 days with maximum of 90 days extension, one-time extension only. At the first instance, the insolvency resolution process will be underway in all cases. So first of all, the possibility of resolution will be exhausted in all cases. But if it remains unsuccessful, then liquidation is triggered. The 2-step process of resolution and liquidation was suggested by the committee in each and every case of insolvency and bankruptcy. If the debtor commits a default or is unable to pay its debts to creditors. No need of any government arm in insolvency resolution or liquidation. So this was one of the unique features of this BLRC. The committee strictly avoided bringing in arms of the government, whether legislature, executive or judiciary, into insolvency resolution. The committee felt that it should be best left to the wisdom of the financial creditors. The notable aspect of the committee report was the recommendation of appointment of regulated private insolvency professionals. So, who are those regulated private insolvency professionals? They are the, for this you are all here to become a regulated private insolvency professional. So, these regulated private insolvency professionals, they were required to handle insolvency resolution process and then liquidation. So there was deliberate attempt to keep away the official liquidation from the insolvency process. Altered distribution waterfall. The distribution waterfall to the claimants, as suggested by the committee, it kept the government dues at a priority below the unsecured financial creditors. Like in earlier laws, unlike the earlier laws, like income tax, etc., the government dues were given preference. But here, the government dues were kept at a priority below the unsecured financial creditors, as it felt that in the long run, this would increase. This would होना चाहिए, थोड़ा सा typing mistake है. This would increase the availability of finance, reduce the cost of capital, promote entrepreneurship, and lead to faster economic growth. The committee also observed that the government also will be the beneficiary of this process, as economic growth will increase revenues. भाई business ही नहीं चलेगा तो growth ही नहीं होगी, कोई revenue भी नहीं आएगा. आपको अपने पैसे पहले लेने की क्या जल्दी पड़ी? आप पैसे अपने government dues बाद में ले लेना. ठीक है? It also felt that the efficiency enhancement and consequent greater value capture through the proposed insolvency regime will bring in additional gains to both the economy and the exchequer. Simplified fresh start process for individuals. Vishwanathan Committee, it suggested a simplified process for default by individuals, including concept of fresh start, where specified loans of a limited class of borrowers can be waived, but this information about individual bankruptcy will reflect in the records of the individuals. So this has been kept as a leeway to allow some politicians to take advantage of this fresh start. In case of fresh start, if your income is below a specified level or your assets are below a specified level, then you are allowed to have a fresh start without even being required to pay your existing liabilities. But it will be reflected in the records of the individual. Another feature was the speed is the essence. So speed is of essence for the working of the bankruptcy code. The shorter insolvency resolution period, 180 days with one-time extension of 90 days and now 330 days including litigation period, the committee felt that it would trigger quick decision-making by the creditors about the fate of the debtor, and if the resolution fails, the liquidation value of the assets will not suffer a greater fall or diminution. The committee noted that delays cause value destruction. So it was felt that a time-bound period should be there for resolving the economic conflict, and if no resolution is possible, then rapid liquidation should take place. Then setting up of regulators. Vishwanathan Committee suggested the establishment of Insolvency and Bankruptcy Board of India to oversee the functioning of the insolvency professionals and information utilities. The committee envisioned the bankruptcy law should not be burdened with bankruptcy process, which should evolve through regulations, allowing much needed flexibility through the regulator to amend them based on experience and changes in the economy. So this Vishwanathan Committee suggested the establishment of IBBI to oversee the functioning of insolvency professional and information utilities. It was felt that the process should evolve through regulations, because amendment in regulations is easier than amendment to the code. So it was envisioned that the bankruptcy law should not be burdened with bankruptcy process, which should evolve through regulations, allowing much needed flexibility to the regulator to amend them based on experience and changes in the economy. Then government committees. There were various committees on bankruptcy reforms during the 100 years of existence of bankruptcy law in India. 1964, 24th Law Commission was there, which and outcome were amendments to the Provincial Insolvency Act 1920. In 1981, based on the Tiwari Committee recommendations, Sikh Industrial Companies Act 1985 came, and 1991, based on the Narasimhan Committee, RDB Act was there in 1993. 92, Nasimhan Committee 2 was there. Surface Act came. 1999, Justice Iradi Committee was there. Companies Amendment Act. This is just a brief history of the various committees which were there and which led to various legislations. But there was a key difference between the earlier committees and the Vishwanathan Committee. It lied in the approach. The past committees, they worked on the existing laws and they suggested either incremental change in the existing laws or creation of additional laws. Treating the board, it should be broad actually. The typing error. Treating the broad landscape of the bankruptcy process as given. So Vishwanathan Committee, on the other hand, had the mandate of comprehensive reform covering all aspects of bankruptcy of individuals and non-financial firms, including but not restricted to limited liability corporations. Not only the Vishwanathan Committee examined the law relating to individual and corporate bankruptcy and insolvency, it also looked at debt recovery laws in a holistic manner, leading to deeper redesign of the entire resolution process rather than working on strengthening any single piece of it. So while the earlier committees, they actually stressed more on just tinkering with the existing laws. But now this Vishwanathan Committee, it had the mandate of comprehensive reform covering all aspects of bankruptcy of individuals and non-financial firms, including but not limited to limited liability corporations. So this was the change. Now let us see part 1. Before we see the IBC, let us have a brief overview. As we all know, central government is supreme, and central government, it has made IBBI, Insolvency and Bankruptcy Board of India, as the regulator. Like in companies, in case of listed companies, SEBI is the regulator. Here, the IBBI is the regulator, which regulates the various functions. Under IBBI come the professionals. So IBBI, it regulates the professionals, it regulates agencies, it regulates information utilities. Two types of professionals are there. You can either practice as an individual or you can form an insolvency professional entity. Sometimes people ask whether we can do our existing practice also. Yes. Suppose you have a firm as Ram and Associates. So you can practice as Ram and Associates. And if you want to practice as an individual IP, then your name will be, suppose Ramchandar. So you will be having another letterhead by the name Ramchandar Insolvency Professional. You will be allowed to have a bank account based on the certificate granted to you. And then you have to keep its proceeds separate. You cannot mix them with the others proceeds. So before becoming an insolvency professional, you have to pass the limited insolvency examination, for which these preparatory classes are being held. Once you pass the examination, it is a 2-hour examination containing 87 questions, I think. So multiple choice questions are there and 2 hours are allotted to you. Some of the questions, they contain 2 marks, and most of the questions, they are of 1 mark each. 70. There is a negative marking, 0.25% for every wrong answer. Once you pass this exam, and everything is online, there is no exchange of papers at any stage. First of all, you go to ibbi.gov.in website. There, under the head examination, you will find limited insolvency examination and national insolvency examination. So only limited insolvency examination is there as on date. There you will find the syllabus. You can create your own user ID and login. And on payment of 1,500 rupees per appearance, for each appearance in the exam, you can appear any number of times. And even those who are not having 10 years of experience, 10 years of membership, they can also appear for the examination. Even a BCom graduate can appear for the examination, but he will not be granted the membership. And he will not be provided the 50 hours mandatory training as well. So before you undertake this 50 hours of training, 10 years membership must be complete. Once you pass the exam with 60% percentage marks, and you undergo the mandatory 50 hours training, which is completed in a 1 week. In 1 week, they complete it. So 8 hours training is provided for 6 days, and it comes to 50 hours of training. Then you are required to enroll yourself with IPA, Insolvency Professional Agency. There are, as on date, there are 3 insolvency professional agencies: ICAI, ICSI, and ICWAI. So either of these agencies you can enroll. Even if you are a chartered accountant, you can enroll with an IPA which is promulgated by Institute of Company Secretaries of India. Similarly, if you are a company secretary, you can enroll yourself with an agency which is promulgated by ICI, Triple IP ICI. And advocates, they can enroll with any of these. So any CA, CS, ICWA, or an advocate having 10 years of membership, 10 years of practice is not required, 10 years of membership, then you can enroll yourself with an insolvency professional agency. And second step is, last step is registration with IBPI, which is the regulator. So you have to enroll yourself with IPA and you have to register yourself with IBPI on definitely payment of certain fees. Some of it is annual fees, some of it is one-time fees. Once you complete all these stages, passing the exam, 50 hours training, enrollment with IPA, registration with IBPI, then you can assume different roles. You can be an interim resolution professional, you can be a resolution professional, you can be a liquidator, you can be a bankruptcy trustee. Besides practicing as an individual, you can form an entity also, to which there are certain requirements of 1 crore net worth, and all those requirements are there. So you can practice as an insolvency professional entity also, that we will read in detail later. Besides that, there are various agencies which regulate these insolvency professionals and insolvency professional entities. Like in case of chartered accountants, ICAI is the agency which regulates our professional conduct. So similarly, Triple IP ICAI, it regulates the conduct of professionals who are registered with it as an IP. Then IPI CMAI is there, and ICSI IIP.com is there. So these are the various insolvency professional agencies. Third are the information utilities. These NESL is the only agency, National E-Governance Services Limited. So nesl.co.in. If you go to the website of NESL, you will find that various banks, they have entered into agreement with NESL for sharing of information. It is basically a repository of financial information, that who has taken the loans, who has created security in favor of the lender, and whenever there is a satisfaction of charge, that also information is entered. So all this information is being fed into this information utilities. Banks or the various financial service providers, they are required to furnish information through periodical returns. Various logins are provided to financial creditors, operational creditors, then corporate debtors, and other persons. On payment of certain fees, they can retrieve also certain information which is available there. But still it is in formative stage. Besides this regulator, as we know, apex court is there, Supreme Court. And besides the below the apex court, the jurisdiction of the High Court is very limited in case of IBC. So there are various appellate authorities and there are various adjudicating authorities. Appellate authorities are National Company Law Appellate Tribunal and Debt Recovery Appellate Tribunal. And adjudicating authority, which is the first authority before which the applicant comes, is the NCLT, National Company Law Tribunal and Debt Recovery Tribunal. The applicant, so whosoever wants to file an application under IBC, he may be a financial creditor who has given financial assistance to a person. He may be an operational creditor who has supplied goods or services, or he may be an employee, or he may be a corporate debtor also. So the company itself, if it wants to go under IBC, so it can also move an application to the adjudicating authority, which is NCLT. In case of individuals and partnership firms, this application will go to the DRT. Any appeals against the orders of NCLT or DRT, it will go to NCLT or DRAT, and further appeal shall be made to the Supreme Court. So this is the basic hierarchy of IBC. Now let us see it section by section. This presentation I have made section by section. And the process to read the code also is to read it section by section. You should, whenever you want to read this IBC, you should have a hard copy with you. You can take a bare code of either Universal or Taxman or any standard tax book. So there you can mark wherever some rules or regulations are there. So you can mark those rules and regulations also in the bare code itself. So part 1 is preliminary, sections 1 to 3. Section 1 says it extends to whole of India, and section 2 it says about the applicability. So various companies, LLPs, body corporates, partnership firms, so it is applicable to all. Section 3, it contains various definitions. Some of the important definitions I have covered here. Like section 319, it talks of insolvency professional. So who is an insolvency professional? Insolvency professional is a person who is enrolled under section 206 with insolvency professional agency and who is registered under section 207 with IBBI. We cannot say enrolled with IBBI and registered with IPA. So these terms are specific. Enrolled under 206 with IPA and registered under 207 with IBBI. Then section 320, it talks of insolvency professional agency. So any person can be registered with IBBI. So any person registered with IBBI under section 201 as IPA is the insolvency professional agency. Then information utility. So person registered with IBBI under section 210 as IU. Okay. Just a minute. In almost all acts, definitions are given in section 2. But here, there is a contrast. Like in IBC, section 2 talks of applicability and section 3 talks of definitions. So here there is a departure from the other acts. In most of the other acts, you will find first section, it deals with the extension. It extends to what? Whether to whole of India or to any specific states. Then section 2 in most of the acts. But there are certain acts in which there is a departure. So here also, there is a departure from the usual seriatim. In section 2 talks of applicability here, and section 3 it talks of definitions. So section 319 it talks of insolvency professional. Section 320 it talks of insolvency professional agency. Section 321 it talks of information utility. Section 323 it talks of person. So who is a person? Then 331 security interest. 318 financial sector regulator. So financial sector regulator is RBI, SEBI, IRDAI, Pension Fund Regulatory Authority, etc. Security interest, it means a right, title or interest or a claim to property created in favor of secured creditor which secures payment and includes mortgage, charge, hypothecation, assignment, but it does not include performance guarantee. Section 323 talks of person. So person, it includes individual, HUF, company, trust, partnership, LLP, any other incorporated body, and includes persons resident outside India. And person resident in India, it is as defined under section 2, subsection 5 of FEMA 99. Then section 3, subsection 6, it talks of claim. So claim means a right to payment, whether it is fixed, whether it is disputed, undisputed, legal, equitable, secured or unsecured. Then besides that, besides right to payment, it also includes, claim also includes right to remedy for breach of contract. So anything which gives rise to right to payment, whether it is fixed, matured, unmatured, disputed, undisputed, secured or unsecured, it is included under the definition of claim. Then section 3, subsection 7, it talks of corporate persons. So corporate persons means a company, LLP or any other person incorporated with limited liability, but it should not include any financial service provider. So there is a separate set of rules for financial service providers. Basically, these financial service providers are those which are regulated under RBI. So there is a special, we'll read them separately. There are special provisions for this financial service provider. Suppose a banker wants to make an application, it can make an application under IBC, but if a person wants to file an application as a financial creditor or operational creditor or corporate creditor against a financial service provider or against a bank, so it cannot do it under this IBC provision. So there are separate provisions for financial service providers. We'll see the definition in detail later. Then section 3, subsection 10, it talks of the term creditor. So creditor is a person to whom debt is owed, and it includes financial creditor, operational creditor, secured creditor, unsecured creditor, and a decree holder. The definition of decree holder we'll see in CPC, which is in our course. Then there is a separate treatment of home buyers under IBC. So home buyers having agreement with assured return clause, they are treated as financial creditors. Then section 3, subsection 11, it talks of debt. So debt means a liability or obligation in respect of a claim which is due from any person and includes a financial debt and operational debt. So any committed return plan, so if any committed return plan is there, it is in the nature of debt. Then section 3, subsection 12, it talks of default. The definition of default is important because default under IBC, this is the triggering point of insolvency resolution process. Default takes place when debt becomes due and is not paid. First of all, it should be due and then it should not be paid. Then only default will, if any debt is not due, then there is no default. And the adjudicating authority has to merely satisfy itself that a default has occurred in case of a corporate debtor who commits a default of a financial debt. There are different conditions for making an application as a financial creditor or as an operational creditor. If you are a financial creditor, the only thing you have to satisfy is that the default has occurred. You have to satisfy the adjudicating authority that default has occurred. But in case of operational creditor, besides that, there are some other conditions also which are given in section 8, that you have to give prior notice and all those things. Then it should be undisputed amount and all. Different claims arising out of different agreements or work orders having different amount and different dates of default cannot be clubbed together for alleged default of debt, the cause of action being separate. So is cause of action. You cannot combine. Suppose you are working on various projects. You are working under various agreements. Then those agreements, those work orders, they cannot be clubbed together because there is any amount is specified, like earlier it was 1 lakh, now it is 1 crore. So you cannot club those work orders or different agreements. So you have to see it cause of action wise. Section 313, it refers to financial information. Section 313, it talks of financial information. So one or more categories of financial information. For financial information, it will include one or more of the following categories of information. First is records of the debt of the person, then records of liabilities when the person is solvent, records of assets of person over which security interest has been created, records of instances of default by the person against any debt, records of the balance sheet and cash flow statement of person, and such other information as may be specified. But then financial institution. So financial institution means a scheduled bank. Then financial institution defined under section 41, 45(1) of the RBI Act. Then public financial institution like LIC, IDFC, UTI and institutions notified by central government where 51% holding is with government or any other institution which is notified by central government. So all these are covered under the term financial institutions. Then section 3, subsection 16, it talks of financial services. So financial services, it includes the following like accepting deposits, administration of assets, effecting contracts of insurance, offering, managing financial product belonging to another person, rendering advice or soliciting, whether buying, selling financial product, availing financial services, then exercising associated rights with financial products or services, establishing or operating an investment scheme, maintaining, transferring record of ownership of financial product, underwriting the issuance of financial product, selling, providing payment instrument or payment resources. Section 3, subsection 17, it talks of financial service provider. So financial service provider means a person engaged in the business of providing financial services in terms of authorization issued or registration granted by a financial sector regulator. So this is also important. In terms of authorization issued or registration granted by a financial sector regulator. So if a financial service provider is not granted a registration certificate by a financial sector regulator, then it can come under IBC. For financial service provider, there are separate provisions which we'll study separately. Section 318, it talks of financial sector regulator. It includes RBI, SEBI, IRDA, then Pension Fund Development Regulatory Authority, and such other regulatory bodies as may be notified. So these were some of the important definitions which were given in section 3. Now, part 2. Part 2, it deals with the CIRP process, corporate insolvency resolution process. Section 4 talks about the triggering of the default. So when default is there and minimum amount, earlier it was 1 lakh, now it is announced to 1 crore. But if you read the code, if you read section 4, it will say that default is minimum as prescribed or any higher amount provided by central government by notification. So section 4 says, this part shall apply to matters relating to insolvency and liquidation of corporate debtors where the minimum amount of the default is 1 lakh rupees, provided that the central government may by notification specify the minimum amount of default of higher value, which shall not be more than 1 crore rupees. So now it has been notified that default will be 1 crore rupees. So government has utilized this power recently. Earlier it was 1 lakh, now it is 1 crore. But separate cause of action should be there, as I already told you. Now is section 5. Section 5, it says who is a corporate applicant. Corporate applicant means corporate debtor, that means the company itself, or any authorized member or partner of the corporate debtor in case of LLP. So LLP is covered under the corporate persons here. Then individual who is in charge of managing the operations and resources of the corporate debtor like CEO, CFO, etc. KMP, person who controls and supervises over the financial affairs of the corporate debtor, say CFO. Then section 5, subsection 6, it talks of dispute. So dispute includes a suit or arbitration proceeding relating to existence of the amount of debt, whether quality of goods or services, or the breach of a representation or warranty. This definition of dispute is very important. It is an inclusive definition. Counterclaim is not a dispute. Suppose a party is claiming that the other person owes him 1 crore rupees and he has defaulted on payment. and the other person counterclaims. So counterclaim is not a dispute. Another thing is that dispute must be pre-existing. Dispute must be pre-existing prior to the receipt of notice, prior to the date of receipt of the notice. And breach of trust and breach of terms of non-disclosure agreement, it is a dispute. It was held in one of the cases. Period of limitation for filing dispute, it need to be taken into consideration. Application pending under section 34 or appeal under section 34 of the Arbitration Act, it is not a dispute. Then for financial debt, even if there is a dispute, it does not matter so long as the debt is due. So if debt is due, whether there is a dispute or not, you can file an application. But in respect of an operational debt, if there is a dispute, then you cannot file an application because it is a resolution mechanism and it is not a recovery mechanism. Suppose you have filed a police complaint for forgery, cheating, falsification, fabrication, etc. So per se, it cannot be the basis of dispute. Solely on this basis, you cannot say that dispute exists. So besides pointing out this police complaint, you have to give specific evidence. So specific evidence is to be brought on record to establish a dispute. Section 5, subsection 8, it talks of financial debt. So financial debt means debt along with interest disbursed against the consideration for the time value of money. So this definition of financial debt is important. Financial debt means debt along with interest disbursed against the consideration for the time value of money. So if anything is given without any consideration, so a gift is given, then IBC cannot be resorted to. And it should be given against the time value of money. And it includes money borrowed against payment of interest, amount raised under acceptance credit facility or a dematerialized equivalent, amount raised by issue of bonds, notes, debentures, loan stock, etc. Then amount of lease liability or hire purchase agreement, which is deemed as finance or capital lease. Receivables sold or discounted, except sold on non-recourse basis. Then amount raised under forward sale or purchase agreement having the commercial effect of borrowing. Derivative transactions. Then counter indemnity obligation in respect of guarantee, LC indemnity bond issued by bank or financial institution. And liability in respect of guarantee or indemnity for items in above cases. So financial debt includes all these things. So bank holding corporate guarantee is considered as a financial credit. Then TDS deduction or interest payment by corporate debtor, it serves as a proof of financial debt because you are required to prove the existence of the debt, that you had given some financial assistance. So if in case some TDS is being deducted or interest payment has been made, then it can also serve as a proof of financial debt. But mere interest payment during certain period, it may not suffice to qualify as a financial debt. Then amount invested by investors, it comes within the meaning of financial debt. Home buyer, earlier there was a confusion whether home buyer are operational creditor or financial creditor. Then it was made clear by explanation to section 5.8 that home buyers, they are covered under the definition of financial debt. But IBC as such does not use the term home buyer. It uses the term allottee in a real estate project approved by RERA. So the expression allottee and real estate project shall have the meaning respectively assigned to them under the RERA Act. Hence, even a allottee of a commercial space. Suppose you have applied for a commercial space in a mall, so then also you are covered under the definition of home buyer. Another important concept in IBC is initiation date. Initiation date is when application is made to the adjudicating authority. And application is made once you, first of all, a petition is presented to the registry, and registry then checks the application whether it is complete in all respects, and it presents it to the bench. So the date when it is presented to the bench, that is considered as the application made. So that is the initiation date. And section 5 subsection 12, it talks of commencement date when application is admitted by adjudicating authority. So the date of making of the application, complete in all respects, and presentation of the same before the bench, that is the initiation date. And when application is admitted by the adjudicating authority, that is the insolvency commencement date, say zero date. Like in project, we have got zero date. So here the 180 days is counted from this commencement date. Section 5, subsection 13, it talks of insolvency process cost. So the amount of interim finance and its raising cost, insolvency process cost is an important concept here, because insolvency process cost it gets precedence in payment over all other dues. So first of all, this process cost, insolvency process cost or liquidation cost is paid. So insolvency process cost, it includes the amount of interim finance and its raising cost, fees payable to the resolution professional, then cost incurred by resolution professional for running business on going concern basis, then cost incurred as expense of government to facilitate RP process, and any other cost specified by IBBI. So these are the various insolvency process costs which get precedence over other payments. Insolvency resolution process period. Initially, it is 180 days with one-time extension of 90 days. Now it has been announced to 330 days, including the litigation period. It will begin from the insolvency commencement date. An insolvency commencement date, as we have already seen, is a date when application is admitted by the adjudicating authority, which is NCLT in case of corporate persons and DRT in case of individuals and partnership firms. And it will end on the 180th day. Section 5, subsection 21, it talks of operational debt. To pass the test of operational debt, as I have already told you, is the debt which is related to either provision of goods, supply of goods, or provision of services. So there is a three-way filtration process for classifying an amount as an operational debt. It should pass three stages. First, it should be a claim as per section 3, subsection 6. Then it should be a debt as per section 3, subsection 11. And then it should be an operational debt as per section 5, subsection 21. So any debt which passes all these three stages is capable of being classified as an operational debt. Another important definition is the definition of related party, section 524. It includes directors, partners or their relatives, key managerial persons or their relatives, LLPs, partnership firm where director, partner or manager or their relative is a partner, then private company, more than 2% share capital, public company, more than 2% share capital, body corporate, LLP, who acts in advice instructions of director, manager, then person on whose advice director, manager or partner act. That is also covered under the definition of a related party. Then body corporate, which is holding subsidiary or an associate company. Then person, if any person controls more than 20% of voting rights. So there are conditions as to voting rights and as to share capital based on which the term related party can be applied. So you can read the definition in detail. Any person who is associated with corporate debtor on account of policy making, essential technical information, having more than 2 directors common, or there is interchange of managerial person, they are also covered under the definition of related party. Section 6. Section 6 says, like as we know, this part 2, it relates to corporates, whether company or LLPs. So if a corporate debtor default when it is triggered, non-payment of debt due. Earlier 1 lakh, now 1 crore. So if a corporate debtor defaults, then financial creditor or operational. Financial creditor is who? Financial creditor is one who has given financial assistance. Operational creditor who has either supplied goods or provided services, or the corporate debtor itself. Corporate debtor means the company itself may initiate insolvency proceedings. This is what section 6 says. And the expression default, it bears the same meaning in section 7 and 8 of the code. In section 7 says the financial creditor. So financial creditor is one who has given the loan or say financial assistance to the corporate debtor. So financial creditor itself or jointly with other financial creditors can file an application to adjudicating authority. And he has to submit simply the record of the default. That record of the default, it may be either available with the information utility, or in case it is not available with the information utility, then it has to provide proof of such default. Name of the RP he has to give, which will act as an IRP, and prior to giving that name, consent of that RP to act as IRP is also obtained, and any other information which may be specified by the board is to attach with the application to be filed under section 7. One of the unique features of section 7 is that the default here includes default for financial debt not only to the applicant but to any other financial creditor also. So in this case, suppose there are 4 banks and default has been made in respect of bank A, then even bank B can move an application under section 7, although no default might have occurred against him or against that bank. And this application can be made either severally or jointly with other financial creditors. Once an application is made by a financial creditor, the adjudicating authority, which is NCLT in case of corporate persons, the period granted to adjudicating authority is 14 days. So within 14 days, it will ascertain whether the default has occurred. So ascertain here means verifying the various documents which are presented by the applicant. Another thing it will see is whether there are any disciplinary proceedings pending against the proposed IRP whose name has been given. So if it is satisfied, adjudicating authority is satisfied that default has occurred and there are no proceedings pending against the person who has been proposed as IRP, it will admit the application. But if it sees that there is no default or the applicant is not able to prove the default, then it will reject the application. But before rejecting an application, it will give an opportunity to rectify the defect within 7 days of receipt of such notice from adjudicating authority. And this period of 7 days for rectifying defects is not mandatory, it is directory. And communication is to be made within 7 days to creditors of the fact of this admission of application. So for the purpose of admitting an application under section 7, default has to be ascertained as on the date of the decision of the adjudicating authority and not at the time of filing of the application. So the default, what is the date of ascertainment of default? Default, it has to be ascertained on the date of decision of the adjudicating authority and not at the time of filing of the application. What it means? That there might be a default at the time of filing of the application, but if in the meantime the person has paid, the corporate debtor has paid, then there may be no default and the application might be rejected. Recently, there were certain amendments to section 5 and section 7. You can see these amendments. In section 5, the major amendment was there that it was clarified that the resolution plan may include provision for the restructuring of the corporate debtor, including by way of mergers, amalgamations, and demergers. Then we'll discuss all these things in detail later. Okay. So we'll discuss just for 5-10 minutes more and then we'll open the chat box. I think we'll go slow in this session of 1 month because we have to study for 1 month. तो हम लोग क्या करेंगे, रोज 1-1 घंटा पढ़ाई करेंगे. 1 घंटा आप कम से कम पढ़ाई करो, ठीक है भाई. जो सेक्शन आपको आज समझा दिए वो कम से कम आप कल उनको पढ़ के आए और अगले भी 5-10 सेक्शन आप पढ़ लें उसको. उससे क्या है कि और जो भी सैटरडे हमारे आएंगे, संडेज आएंगे, उस दिनों हम ज्यादा भी पढ़ सकते हैं, कोई दिक्कत नहीं है. बीच में हम लोग जो है, सपोज कोई बीच में छुट्टी आ गई, छुट्टी वाले दिन हम ज्यादा कर लेंगे, या सैटरडे को भी हम लोग थोड़ा ज्यादा ले सकते हैं. सैटरडे संडे थोड़ा ज्यादा किया करेंगे. सैटरडे संडे विल हैव 2 आवर्स क्लास और बाकी दिन हम जो है 1 घंटे क्लास लेंगे. उससे क्या है कि 50 आवर्स का हमारा सेशन जो है वो 1 मंथ में कंप्लीट हो जाएगा. लेकिन ये 50 आवर्स से भी आप ये मत समझिए कि मैंने जो पढ़ा दिया खाली उसी से हो जाएगा. आपको क्या करना है,